Hi, hello, eighth graders. I'm doing a video with you today to talk about The Giver. One of my favorite books, one of the books that everybody just loves to hate. It's excellently written and it is ridiculously frustrating. So you may have gotten to some of those frustrating parts, and that's okay. So I'm talking to you about chapters 8 and 9, no, 9 and 10, which you were supposed to read last week. I'm not getting, some of you are not sending me your study guide pages. When you answer the study guide questions, I need you to snap a picture of them or something and send them to me so that I can give you credit for doing them. And please do that before you watch the video in which I give you my versions of the answers, because I want you to write down your answers. And a lot of these questions are sort of opiniony questions. Some of them there aren't right or wrong answers about, okay? But we're going to talk about chapters 9 and 10. So in chapter 9 is when Jonas gets his rules. He gets his rules for being the receiver, which is really interesting. He talks to Asher a little bit kind of lightheartedly, and then he goes to his bedroom and he reads his rules. Now, your question for chapter 9, that's all it asks, is what did Jonas think about these rules? And I think that we probably could adequately say that they blew his mind. He was surprised and shocked at some of the rules, and some of them really kind of upset him a little bit. So there wasn't a whole lot of space on that little page for you to write about every single rule. So you might have taken some time on a piece of paper to write about the different rules. But the rules are on page 68 of our book, of my book, the one that I have. I think yours is the same. The page numbers are the same. Number 1, going immediately at the end of school hours to the annex entrance of the house of the old and presenting himself to the attendant. And then number 2, going immediately to his dwelling at the conclusion of the training hours really bothered him, because that meant that he wasn't going to get to play with his friends anymore. I also want to clarify for you the word annex. I don't think it was in any of our dictionaries or glossaries. An annex is simply an added on building. It's part of a building that's added on after the other rest of the building was built. And sometimes it's even sort of like a different construction, like a shed kind of material. Or sometimes you'll see schools, especially like church schools, would have like a trailer that is an annex building. It's sort of attached to the main building, but it's not. And in some cases, they're not attached at all, like if it was a trailer where people had classrooms. Um, but sometimes it's just like an added on, it's like an addition to the building. And in this case, the annex is separate and it's attached to the larger building. And actually, it is in your glossary. I just looked it up. It's right here. The definition here says a separate room attached to a larger building. So, and this is more than a room, though. This is a separate building, but it's a smaller building, and it only consists of a few rooms. And it has its own little entrance, but it's also still attached to the house of old. So I'd imagine, and we'll probably see later, that there is, in fact, an entrance that you can use to get into the house of the old. So they're usually connected. All right, so number 3 kind of confuses him, where it says that you may ask questions of any citizens and you will receive answers, and that he doesn't have to worry about being rude anymore. And they had talked in other chapters about how you have to be very polite and very considerate of everyone else's feelings, and he doesn't have to do that anymore. And that's part of what disturbs him about these rules, is that he's like, I can't imagine why I would ever want to be rude, you know? But then at the same time, so that kind of startled him, and he read it again and he realized that it was an option, that he wasn't obligated to be rude, but that that it was optional. And so that if he felt he needed information, he would receive answers. Then do not discuss your training with anybody, including your parents. Sort of bothered him a little bit too, because he didn't want to have to keep secrets. But the dream telling he was actually happy about, because it seems like he didn't really like dream telling anyways. And then he's like, well, the final rule then he didn't want to really think about because it was so unheard of. The restriction to medication makes him realize that there's going to be some pain and discomfort associated with this. And it's interesting because we get kind of a view into their society of how kind of babied they were, that if he slammed his finger into the door, then he immediately got this pain pill that took all the pain away. And so these citizens, we start to get a glimpse of how sheltered and these citizens are in this society. Then we have the um, he can't be permitted to apply for release, which he doesn't understand at all, and we don't understand it. It's why would anybody want to apply for release? But you're going to see that come into play later on in the book. So just kind of keep that one, in the back of your mind because that rule's there for a reason. And then you may lie. And this one bothered him the most because he doesn't lie. I mean, his family is currently lying about Gabriel, and if you have the theme of truth and lies, then you definitely should have taken note of these parts where it talks about how that where it talks about the fact that you may lie. And then at the end, page 71, it's interesting. It says his mind reeled, which means that he was just thinking and he couldn't make sense of what was going on. Now empowered to ask questions of utmost rudeness and promised answers, he could conceivably, though it was almost unimaginable, ask someone, perhaps an adult, his father perhaps, do you lie? But he would have no way of knowing if the answer he received were true. So that is interesting. And that's one of the things that, sort of wrestling with in this book is the idea of, people telling the truth and people telling lies. Also, the rules themselves, I think one of you chose that whole the burden of choice versus freedom, the fact that he has to follow these rules. He has no freedom. He had no freedom to choose whether he wanted to be the receiver or not. And these rules are pretty restrictive, especially with what he's allowed to do. He's not allowed to tell anybody what's going on. He has to go straight home after training. All of these things are very restrictive. So if you have that theme, I think at least one of you chose that theme, then you're going to want to write that information down as well. Now, for the good part, we get to go to the annex building and meet the old man. All right. So, let's see. So your question asks, and I have to go back to that page. Your question asks, how is Jonas treated by the secretary? And the thing that struck him immediately when he walked in was that she stood up as a form of respect. And the fact that she is giving him so much respect really surprises him because he's not used to being treated that respectfully by adults. So that was something that really is surprising to him. What is different about the receiver's home? Now, the whole chapter gives you information about this, but a couple of things that I want to make sure that you've caught on to was the furniture. It's interesting because all those things were in the spacious room. Okay, a bed for sleeping, a table. It says, where am I? Page 74. He found himself in a comfortable furnished living area, and it was not unlike his own family unit's dwelling. Furniture was standard throughout the community, practical, sturdy, the function of each piece clearly defined. So here again, we have this lack of choice. They don't even have a choice in how their apartments are furnished, and everything is very utilitarian, like it serves a purpose. But each one was slightly different. And it talks about how the sofa was thicker, more luxurious. The table legs were not straight, but they were slender and curved, and they had some decoration in them, which he's not used to seeing. The bed had splendid cloth, and it was intricate signs and just a lot of decoration that he's not used to seeing. Another thing that is very, very interesting is when they talk about the books. The biggest difference, the most conspicuous difference was the books. In his own dwelling, there were only necessary reference novels, their dictionary, a thick community volume, which gives you descriptions of all the offices and everything in the community, and then the book of rules. That's it. That's all Jonas's house has. 3 books. So this lets you know and lets you see how limited their knowledge was, the knowledge of these people in this community, that they're not even reading for pleasure. They only have 3 books in their house, and then they have their school books in their school, and that's it. Nobody's reading novels. Nobody's reading the Bible. Nobody's reading the history or science or any of these things that are not taught in the school. So it's very limited knowledge that these people have. And that's important. That's especially important with the theme of choice. And so here he has more books than he's ever seen in his entire life. And he's like thousands of books, and he couldn't even imagine, could there be rules beyond the rules governed by the community? Could there be more descriptions of offices and factories and committees? So he can't even think in his brain of what these books can contain, because he has no frame of reference to go back on to even think that these could be stories or histories, or biographies or anything of that sort. So that's an important thing for you to note. So what is the giver's job, and what must he give Jonas? So this is where we get our title of the book. So Jonas is now the receiver, which makes the old receiver now the giver. And he used to be the receiver of memory, but now he is the giver of memory, and he's going to give these memories to Jonas. But these are not just any memories. These are history. And you'll see as he goes to show Jonas some of these memories, you start to realize how limited the knowledge these people in the society had, which I just noticed you can see my big fat cat in the background. You see Storm back there. And all my books piled up. He knocked them over. Anyways, so where was I? I got distracted by seeing my cat. Yes, the giver of memories. So let me see if I can find this. Beginning today, at page 75. It's interesting, this interchange that they have. And the giver is kind of cryptic with Jonas, but also really direct. And he even says, please forgive me if I'm unclear. Please ask questions. Let me know what is going on. And he was really happy to see Jonas. You could tell he was kind of tired of being the receiver. And he even says that he's not as old as he looks. So it's a very stressful job. He talks about how pleased he was. Now, where am I? On page 77. Jonas is like, oh, well, I've had people tell me their memories before of their childhood and stuff. And then the old man says, no, I'm not being clear. It's not my past, not my childhood that I must transmit to you. And he says, it's the memories of the whole world. He said with a sigh, before you, before me, before the previous receiver, and generations before him. And Jonas is confused, and he's like, the whole world? He doesn't understand. He says, do you mean not just us, not just the community? Do you mean elsewhere too? And notice this is on page 78, elsewhere has a capital letter, as if it's like a formal place. But this is all that they know, is the community and elsewhere, and they don't know about elsewhere. All they know about is the community. And he says, I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand. I don't know what you mean when you say the whole world or generations before him. I thought there was only us, and I thought that there was only now. So here we have this limited amount of knowledge, excuse me, that Jonas had. Excuse me. And then the giver says, so they keep going, and he says there's much more. I'm still on page 78. There's all that goes beyond, all that is elsewhere, and that goes back and back and back. I have received all of those when I was selected, and here in this room all alone, I re-experience them again and again. It is how wisdom comes. It is how we shape our future. He rested a moment, breathing deeply. I am so weighted with them. And Jonas felt very concerned. And then he says, it's as if, and he paused, seeming to search, it's like going downhill through deep snow on a sled. And then he starts to realize that Jonas doesn't know what snow is, and Jonas doesn't know what a sled is. So here we are starting to realize even more how restricted they are in this society, that they don't even experience cold or experience snow. So then this is where he tells them to relax. It's not going to be painful. Um, he turned the speaker off so they wouldn't be disturbed, which is a rare privilege and just blows Jonas's mind even more. And then he says, I'm going to transmit to you the memory of snow. So then now we're going to go into the chapters. And I don't know if you kept reading or if you stopped, but now your assignment is going to be to read chapters 11 and 12, where Jonas is going to start receiving memories, and you're just going to start to understand and sort of get into, like, now we're getting into like the nitty gritty of the plot. So those are your questions. So you are going to read chapters 11 and 12, answer the questions thoughtfully, send them to me. I'm not writing them, I'm not marking them right or wrong, but I just want to see that you are answering them and putting forth some effort, okay? And then next time we talk, or next time I do a video, then we'll talk about those. Okay? So I hope that you have a nice day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.